Everybody, welcome back to Watching the Meta episode 6, 7? Been doing this for so long I forgot how many episodes we're in now at this point. But you guys seem to like this content a lot. It seems to be some of the best performing stuff on the channel over the past month or so as we've been doing this. And the content has been doing so well, as I alluded to last week, we're going to branch into some different formats today. Before we continue, as always, be sure to like the video if you enjoy this type of content. Subscribe to the channel. Really does help out the analytics and helps the channel grow. And appreciate all those new subs. And most importantly, let me know what you thought in the comments section down below, how we can improve this moving forward. If you guys like the visuals, the graphs, all that kind of stuff, because we got a lot of data to go over here. So, the first format we are going to be taking a look at is Pioneer, because that is what we've been focusing on the past couple of weeks, all culminating with the regional championship in DC, which we discussed last week. And this particular week, we had actually 8 Pioneer events. So 6 Magic Online challenges, and then 2 regional championships, one in Japan, one in Southeast Asia. And this is what the metagame looks like. Now, you recall last week, prowess was maybe a little bit higher, but it seems to have flattened out a little bit. You have 12.1% Phoenix, 11.3% prowess. Those are kind of like neck and neck. And then the mono black twin deck. And I know I saw a lot of you commenting in the last video. I'm calling it twin because this version has Slasher and Bloodletter. There are mono black demons or Rakdos demons deck that do not contain the combo. That is the differential. And I do want to make sure those are separate on the graph because I think they are distinctly different decks. Azorius Control at 7, and then Mardu Grease Fang Celestia Company both at 6.6. Enigmatic Rakdos Demons, Rakdos Transmogrify, and then once you get down to Spirits Lotus Field combo, it dips off a little bit there. So, as far as the metagame is concerned, Phoenix back on top for the first time in what feels like months at this point, which is a little surprising. Now, it's not that much higher than Rakdos Prowess, so yes, Phoenix is the most played deck, but it's not 25 to 30%. And what's interesting is we're sort of seeing this shift in terms of it's starting to flatten out. It's not like a ton of Rakdos Prowess. What I want to note here is the dip in Enigmatic. Enigmatic was a little bit higher last week. It's kind of fallen off a little bit in favor of stuff like Celestia Company, the Mono Black Twin deck, which, by the way, the reason that the mono black deck is so high is the representation in Japan was out of control. I didn't go down the entire event in Japan, but I'm pretty sure it was the most played deck by a lot. So this is what the metagame looks like. Just to give you some thoughts on the format as a whole, I think Pioneer is the best it's been in probably years at this point. The metagame feels extremely wide open. You can play whatever you want. And it's really unfortunate because I believe that Pioneer is currently the best format available to us, and we don't really have a reason to play it. There's no RCQ season, there's no Spotlight Series in the next couple of months for Pioneer. The people who are qualified for the Pro Tour, I guess, get to play it, but for everybody else, not so much. But speaking of sweet format, let's take a look at some sweet decks from Pioneer over the weekend. I have 5 for you here. For context, the winners of the 6 Pioneer Challenges and the 2 RCs, just to give you an idea of what won these tournaments, Azorius Control, Is It in Soul, Rakdos Prowess, Dimir Ninjas, Acerak Combo did win a challenge, love to see it. And then we have Rakdos Prowess, a Mono Black Splinter Twin Demon deck, and then Rakdos Prowess. So those are the decks that won the events in Pioneer this weekend. The first one that I want to highlight is from the top 8 of one of the challenges. It is from user CuteChandra19, and we have Mono Blue Enigma Jewel. Interesting deck here where it's trying to utilize the Enigma Jewel as a mana engine, as it were. And Enigma Jewel is powerful because it is a soul ring, but you can only use it on activated abilities. Now, activated abilities include Mirror Shell Crab, because that cycles. You can use the Enigma Jewel to cycle the crab. Omen Hawker. This isn't necessarily an activated ability per se, but it gives you some redundancy on the jewel, which this is similar where it's a 1-mana creature, makes 2 mana, spend it on activated abilities. And then other activated abilities include Shark Typhoon, cycling, activated ability, Clue tokens from Deduce, Reckoner Bankbuster, and then more importantly, Nykthos Shrine to Nyx, where Jewel gives you a little bit of a discount on the Nykthos, and Jewel is a permanent for the Nykthos. So shout out to Cute Chandra, top-aided the challenge with Mono Blue. I guess we're calling it Mono Blue Jewel. It's a really sweet deck, though. Next one I want to take a look at is Karate Dom, also top-aided a challenge with Esper Greasefang. Now, you may have seen Abzan Greasefang. You may have even seen recent additions like Mardu Greasefang with Fear of Missing Out. But how about Esper Greasefang with Abhorrent Oculus? Now, this one's pretty cool because it has a bunch of mill enablers like Stitcher Supplier, like Otherworldly Gaze, Faithful Mending, and Tainted Indulgence. So, a bunch of ways to fill up the graveyard. Now, normally, with your Greasefang plan, filling up the graveyard means putting Parhelion into the graveyard, playing Greasefang, getting it back into play. But now with this sort of plan B, you can just fill up the graveyard, cast an Oculus. If you mill an Oculus, you can also can't stay away the Oculus. So, really cool addition. Not sure if it's better than Mardu, but probably something that's interesting and definitely worth trying. Next deck I want to highlight is from Carnage Cards, ENT in 26th place. This is, I believe, a deck list that I want to say initially came from the Southeast Asia Regional Championship. I believe it got 25th place there. And this deck list is Reanimator. So we have Rite of the Moth as a 4-mana reanimation spell. Now, what's interesting is maybe you've seen in previous watching the meta videos, we've talked about Mardu Reanimator, Fable the Mirror Breaker, Blood Tithe Harvester, Fear of Missing Out as ways to discard your large creatures that, Atraxa, Overlord, Valgavoth, things like that. Overlord is another way to mill over creatures. There's really none of that stuff. No Blood Tithe, Fable, Fear of Missing Out. Now, what's interesting about this deck is the way that we are putting a creature into the graveyard is with Cynical Loner, which is the 3/1. If it's tapped, you can basically entomb. But what's interesting is you'll notice there's no vehicles, so no copter, none of that stuff that you can tap the Loner. But the really cool synergy here is Restoration of Aganjo, because there's two things. So on Chapter 2, Restoration of Aganjo says you discard a card, and then you can return a permanent card with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So, two things. One, this can just discard the Atraxa because you can discard any card, or you can discard the Cynical Loner. When the Restoration brings the Loner back, it's tapped. That turns it on for post-combat main phase to go get the Atraxa, and you see where this is going. So, really, really cool synergy. Probably going to have to try this one out myself at some point. Next deck I want to highlight here is First Place. Shout out to Lori WWA, who won a challenge with ninjas. Now, I'm not sure that we can necessarily call this deck ninjas per se. Let me know in the comments, how many ninjas do you need in your deck before you can call yourself a ninjas deck? Because there's really only 4. There's 4 copies of Moon Circuit Hacker, but we're utilizing stuff like Ornithopter and Mockingbird and Fairy Miscreant as cheap or free flyers to help facilitate Moon Circuit Hacker, but more importantly, Kaido Bane of Nightmares. I played a league with this deck, and every time that I got to Ninjutsu Kaido, I think I won all of those games. The card is just completely cracked. I don't know if this is the best shelf for it. There's maybe some avenues to explore like spirit stuff because you have Mausoleum Wanderer and Spectral Sailor as 1-mana 1/1 flyers that also enable Kaido. Some things to explore, but basically the recipe of cheap flyers, Thought's Fatal Push, and Kaido is a really good core, and one that's almost certainly worth exploring because Kaido is crazy. And the last deck that I want to highlight here just very briefly is Golgari Sacrifice. This is from the Japanese Regional Championship. Just wanted to note that there's some interesting cards here, notably Elvish Archivist, which is one that we really haven't seen before, but does pair very nicely with stuff like Scavenger's Talent and Witch's Oven. There's some interesting what-ifs here. Not sure I've seen Garruk Unleashed in a Pioneer deck list ever. But yeah, really just wanted to highlight the introduction of Elvish Archivist into the Sacrifice archetype. Might be worth exploring. Well, if you thought Pioneer was a wide-open format, boy, do I have quite the opposite for you. Now we're going to be taking a look at the modern format, and as you can see, the data doesn't lie. Now, I will say, now because I've got some mean comments from the modern truthers in my Twitch chat over the past couple of days, this is only the top 32s of the challenge, so you do have to take this data with a grain of salt. It's possible that the play rate of Boros Energy is a little bit lower in these challenges. It's possible that the win rate of Boros Energy in these challenges is a little bit lower. There's no way for us to gather that data. The only thing that we can do is base conclusions on the data that we have. And maybe that's not a good idea to do, but we're going to do it because this is all the data that we literally have. I don't have win rates. I don't have anything else for you. What I do have is Boros Energy at 32.3% of the top 32 metagame in the challenges over the weekend. I believe there were 5. Let me double check on that real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sorry, 6 challenges. So similar numbers to Pioneer without the RCs. Yeah, I mean, this is the most played deck in the format by a landslide. I don't even know if this number necessarily changes all that much, even if you include total play rates past top 32 and all this stuff. Other than Boros Energy, which is the clear tier 0 deck, you have Domain Zoo, Ruby Storm, Temur Eldrazi coming in at 6.3%, all reasonable decks. Mono Blue Belcher actually had quite a good weekend. It won 2 challenges over the weekend, so it did put up some numbers, but it's hard to compare when you're looking at 32% Boros Energy. Dimir Oculus at 5.2. You'll notice that I have on this graph, I have Dimir Oculus and Dimir Frog tied separate. That is because the Oculus builds, I do think, are noticeably different than the Frog tied ones. Oculus is playing 4 Boron Oculus, Frog Tide is playing no Boron Oculus, so just keep that in mind. Just Guy Control, Living End, Affinity, go a little bit of a representation there. And then you see the breakdown from there. Mardu Energy at 2.1% compared to Boros at 32 is kind of wild. There's not really a ton to say about this other than if you want to win in Modern, it's probably a good idea for you to play Boros Energy. If you have an RCQ or another big tournament coming up, you probably should be playing that deck. The Modern challenges this weekend were won by Grinding Breach, Temur Eldrazi, Mono Blue Belcher, Boros Energy, and Boros Energy. As far as some interesting decks, there was a couple that I wanted to highlight from the weekend, and I want to start with 23rd place on the 10-11 challenge from the Nectar. This is Affinity. Now, if you have been playing Modern for maybe about 7-8 years around that time, I forget how long it's been, you might remember a little card called Mox Opal. And shout out to my Mox Opal enjoyers because that was my first ever Modern deck and kind of what got me into Modern. Rest in peace. We miss you sorely every day, Mox Opal. But we are trying some Affinity with Tamiyo meets the Story Circle. So this is, I believe you're mostly playing this for Chapter 2, which says discard any number of cards, then investigate twice for each card discarded this way. So if you discard 3 cards, you get 6 clues. And 6 artifacts let you immediately cast either Thought Monitor or Kappa Cannoneer. So it's a really nice way to just get a whole bunch of artifacts onto the battlefield as quick as possible. We kind of have the usual suspects, your Memnites, your Ornithopters. Tamiyo is an interesting inclusion. It's not an artifact itself, but it does generate an artifact every time you attack with it. And it's a way for you to gain a little bit of card advantage because Thought Monitor flips Tamiyo by itself. And I don't know, there are no copies of Thoughtcast, which is a little interesting. I feel like maybe there's a build of this deck that plays Tamiyo, Thought Monitor, and Thoughtcast, but some food for thought there. The next deck that I want to highlight from the same challenge, 10-11, from Screenwriter NY in 26th place. This is Slivers? Question mark? But for you Meat Hook fans out there, if you get that reference, not exactly the Sliver deck that you probably expected. What we are playing here is a combo with Sorin Imperious Bloodlord and Morophon the Boundless. So Morophon the Boundless says it's a changeling, which happens to be a sliver and a vampire, the first ever vampire sliver. And it says that as it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Spells of the chosen type cost Wooburg less to cast. So the joke here is you Sorin the Morophon into play, you choose Sliver, and then you get to cast a bunch of Wooburg slivers, notably the first sliver and Sliver Legion, which basically pumps all slivers for all slivers in the battlefield. This one is Cascade, so you eventually just go through your deck, eventually find Cloud Shredder to give them all flying and haste. These are legendary, but you only really need 1 copy of each, because if you have 1 of each of these creatures in play, that's just lethal, and you can Cascade into all of your Cloud Shredders. So you can keep all of these in play. And they all get pumped by Legion, etc., etc. Really cool combo deck that is playing the One Ring. Look, every deck's playing the One Ring. It is what it is. What I like about this deck, too, is you have Malevolent Rumble to find the combo. It finds both Sorin and Morophon, and Demonic Council to potentially tutor, because Rumble, good at setting up Delirium, stuff like that. The next deck I want to highlight is maybe a little bit more competitive than the previous 2. Shout out to Chimney Norbit in 12th place. Chimney Norbit has been a champion of this Rakdos Hollow One deck for quite some time, and they've been putting up some really good results, and they continue here with another 12th place. I believe they might have had a top 8 this weekend as well. And they have even convinced me to purchase the cards for this deck. I think I'm a believer of the hollow ones. I think it's a really good strategy. It did pick up some new cards here in the form of noticeably Fear of Missing Out, which is a discard outlet for hollow one. It lets you get closer to Delirium because you can dump Phoenix, but more importantly, it gives you a second attack where you can get a second attack with hollow one. That's another 4/4 attacking. Or you can get a second attack with Netherglyph because Netherglyph gets very large. Netherglyph also wears Detective Phoenix very well. Some really cool stuff going on there. You have the Wombo combo of Burning Inquiry plus Orcish Bowmasters. Sometimes that gets people, especially those Boros players. Imagine having a Bowmaster in play, casting a Burning Inquiry against your opponent's board of Guide of Souls, Ocelot Pride. They're all dead. So some cool stuff going on there. Other than that, it's really a lot of the stuff that you would maybe associate with Hollow One. Again, Burning Inquiries, Goblin Lores, Street Wraiths, other ways to cycle Mishra's Bauble to pair with Channeler because you get Delirium pretty frequently. So really cool deck. Like it a lot. And then last but not least, this Basking Broodscale combo deck that really has been putting up some results lately. I think the first person I saw play it was Matt Nass, who I think won an RCQ with it. But this is the deck that we were working on a little bit. I spent a lot more time playing more expensive cards like Ugin's Labyrinth with Devourer of Destiny, Worldbreaker, things like that. And this is a much leaner version. It's going lower to the ground with the maximum number of copies of Blades and 4 sagas. So you have 8 ways to find Blade. You have Stirrings, Rumble, and Broodscale. So you have a lot of ways to find Broodscale. And then 4 Fleshrakers. That's your kill piece, also with Kozilek's Command. But what's really nice is that just Glaring Fleshraker and Kozilek's Command can just kill people by themselves. You don't need the combo as much, where you go. It's similar to what's happening in Legacy, where they're playing a bunch of soul lands, Kozilek's Command for 6, deal you 6 with the Fleshraker, the Kozilek's Command finds another Kozilek's Command, and then you just kind of burn them out because you can sack the Scions to then cast the new Kozilek's Command that you find. So there's some really cool ways to just burn people out with Fleshraker, even if you can't set up the combo. So some things to think about moving forward, and shout out to Celestial in 5th place. And the last format we are going to be taking a look at here is Standard. So there's only 4 challenges for Standard over the weekend, and I don't know why, but I thought there was at least 5 or 6. Somebody can correct me in the comments section because I'm sure I'm missing something, but for some reason I swore there was an extra challenge in Standard over the weekend, but I was only able to find data from 4, so 4 standard challenges over the weekend. Mono white tokens 15.6%, Golgari midrange 14.8%. Drops off a little bit after that. Orzhov Demons, which is an interesting take on the demon archetype. It turns out a lot of those cards are legal in Standard. Bloodletter of Aklazotz, Unstoppable Slasher, Unholy NX. Pairing it with a little bit of a white splash, there's also Rakdos Demons. I've seen Golgari Demons. The only one I really haven't seen at this point is Dimir Demons, but seems like a pretty versatile shell. Azorius Oculus, kind of utilizing Oculus, Haughty Djinn with reanimation effects and a bunch of self-mill. Jeskai Convoke, Boros tokens, Domain, Gruul Prowess, Dimir midrange. So, I mean, as far as the top of the metagame, it is 15.6% mono white, 14.8% Golgari. That takes up roughly around 30% of the metagame, so a little less than a third of the metagame being mono white Golgari. And then past that, some demons, Oculus. It does seem like the metagame is reasonably wide open. You can kind of play whatever you want. The weird thing that I will mention about Standard is I feel like for some reason, and I don't know if it's just pure laziness, but for some reason, there's so much more copy-paste when it comes to the Standard format than any of the other 2 formats. Now, I get it. People maybe don't have enough time. They're playing a lot of challenges over the weekend. They just take whatever won the recent challenge, they copy-paste it, play the next challenge with it. I get that. But I don't know. It just feels like there's so much more of that in Standard than Pioneer or Modern. You see a lot less of that in the other formats, is really all I'm saying. But as far as the metagame is concerned, slightly top-heavy for Golgari and Mono White, but I think overall, pretty healthy metagame. The challenges were won by Mono White tokens, Golgari midrange, Mono White tokens, and Azorius Oculus. Got you with that one. 3 decks that I want to highlight before I end this particular video. So, the first one is a personal favorite of mine from It's Just Squid in 20th place with Gruul Delirium. So, if people have been watching the channel over the past couple of weeks, past month or so, you'll know my obsession with this Delirium archetype in Pioneer. I've even started branching out into Modern with it. But it turns out that a lot of the cards in the Pioneer deck are also standard legal. You have the payoffs with Fear of Missing Out, Omnivorous Flytrap, and Wildfire Wicker Folk. You have the enablers with Torch the Tower and Patchwork Beastie. Inti kind of acts as a weird, like, half enabler, half payoff. And then you have Breakout, which is a way to find your payoffs, beasties, wildfires, and Inti's Fear of Missing Outs. So a lot of the deck is here. Torch the Tower is removal, a couple of Obliterating Bolts, just a really clean deck list. An interesting addition here in the form of Screaming Nemesis. Not sure exactly how the good that card is, but overall, love this archetype. Probably going to be spending a lot of time on it as we approach the Spotlight Series. That's what it's called. I knew that. In Atlanta coming up in January. So maybe a bit of a shift on focus towards Standard in the coming months? Question mark. Next deck I want to highlight from Saddleback Legak, great username. 10th place from the 10-12 Standard Challenge. This is Blue-Black Control, but with a twist. So you're probably, I guess maybe I shouldn't say you're used to these cards, but Counterspell, Removal Spell, Counterspell, Removal Spell, Removal Spell, Card Draw, Removal Spell, Sweeper, Removal Spell. But instead of winning the game with, I guess, conventional means for control decks, we are winning the game with Doomsday Excruciator and Jace the Perfected Mind. So Doomsday Excruciator exiles all but the bottom 6 cards of each library, both players' libraries, and Jace happens to, well, this Jace doesn't because you probably can't read Phyrexian, but it enters with 5 loyalty, and you can minus X to mill target player for 3 times X. So simple math equation here. If they have 6 cards in their library and you have a Jace on 2 loyalty, 3 times 2, any ideas? Let me know in the comments. So that's kind of the idea, to kill them instantly with that, which I think is interesting because control decks typically struggle with closing out games, especially against decks like Domain Control, if that becomes a popular deck in the format. But having this 1-2 punch to just end the game on the spot, and it's hard to interact with if you just have the Doomsday and hold the Jace in hand, outside of a counterspell or a discard spell. If they kill your Doomsday, who cares? You still get to resolve the Jace. So really cool deck list. Maybe something worth spending time on. And last but not least, shout out, I don't know how Bailey does. This is BCS8995, who I know pretty well. He's a local, goes to the same locals that I do. And he has top-8'd a Standard Challenge with 80 cards. Bailey, where's the Orion? Where'd the Orion go? 12 Overlords, Bitter Reunion, Leyline Binding, Spelunking for card draw and additional mana ramp, up the Beanstalk, works very well with all the Overlords. And then really it's just a bunch of removal like Get Lost, Ill-Timed Explosion. And then I think the big setup here is you're eventually getting to a spot where you doppelgang a bunch of Overlords. So if that interests you, that's kind of cool. Not really sure why we're playing 80 cards. I feel like we can just trim on some of these numbers, but it's a cool concept of just playing a bunch of Overlords with doppelgang, Beanstalk, ramp, removal, stuff like that. It's a good concept. We got to be able to trim this down to 60, right? And that is going to wrap up another episode of Watching the Meta. I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you all so much for watching. Last but certainly not least, subscribe to the channel. Let me know what you thought down in the comment section below. That is the most important part, how we can improve the series moving forward. And with all of that said, I will see you guys in the next video. But until next time, adios.